The flowers we leave behind. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the cemetery still glistened with moisture. Droplets clung to blades of grass and rolled slowly down the smooth faces of weathered headstones. The air smelled of wet earth and pine trees, and somewhere in the distance, a mourning dove called out its lonely song. Sarah Mitchell walked carefully along the narrow path between the graves. She was 32 years old, though the worry lines around her eyes made her look older. Her worn sneakers were soaked through from the damp grass, and her thin cardigan did little to keep out the October chill. In her hands, she carried a small bundle of wildflowers, daisies and black-eyed Susans that she had picked from the vacant lot near her apartment building. She came here every Saturday morning, just after dawn, when the cemetery was quiet and empty. It was her sacred time, her moment of peace before returning to the chaos of her life, the double shifts at the diner, the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen counter, the constant worry about making rent. Sarah stopped at a grave near the old oak tree. The headstone was simple but elegant, made of gray granite with delicate carved flowers along the border. The name read, Eliza Chase, with dates that showed she had been only 29 when she died, 3 years ago. Sarah knelt down and carefully removed the previous week's flowers, now brown and withered. She placed the fresh wildflowers in the small metal vase attached to the headstone, arranging them gently, making sure each stem had enough water. "Good morning, Eliza," Sarah whispered, as she always did. "I hope you're resting peacefully." She didn't know Eliza Chase. Had never met her, never spoken to her, never even seen a photograph of her face. But something about this grave had called to Sarah from the very first day she had come to this cemetery, 3 years ago, to visit her grandmother's final resting place. It was the loneliness of it that had struck her first. Eliza's grave sat slightly apart from the others, beneath the sprawling branches of the oak tree. Week after week, Sarah noticed that no one ever came to visit. No flowers were left, no stones were placed on top of the headstone, as was the custom in some traditions. The grave seemed forgotten, abandoned, lost to time and memory. Sarah couldn't bear it. She remembered how her grandmother used to say that everyone deserved to be remembered, that love shouldn't end just because life did. So one Saturday, Sarah brought extra flowers and left them on Eliza's grave. The next week, she did it again. And again. It became part of her routine, part of her Saturday morning ritual. She would sit by the grave for a few minutes, talking quietly about her week, about the weather, about nothing in particular. It made her feel less alone. Perhaps, she thought, it made Eliza feel less alone too, wherever she was. This particular Saturday morning, Sarah lingered longer than usual. She was tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She had worked until midnight the night before, serving endless plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes to tired truckers and late-night travelers. Her feet ached, and her back hurt, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going at this pace. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she said softly to the headstone, running her fingers over the carved name. "I'm trying so hard, Eliza, but everything feels like it's falling apart." "She would have told you to keep going." The voice came from behind her, deep and unexpected. Sarah gasped and spun around, her heart hammering in her chest. A man stood a few feet away, partially hidden in the shadows of the oak tree. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and an expensive-looking black coat. His face was handsome but tired, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I didn't mean to startle you. I heard you talking to her." Sarah stood up slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment at being caught talking to a grave. "I didn't think anyone else would be here this early." The man took a step closer, and Sarah could see his face more clearly now. There was something haunting in his expression, something raw and wounded. "I come here sometimes," he said quietly. "But usually later in the day. I saw you here once before, leaving flowers. I stayed back, not wanting to intrude." Sarah glanced down at the headstone, then back at the man, confusion creasing her forehead. Did you know Eliza?" The man's laugh was short and hollow, full of pain. "Know her? She was my wife." The words hit Sarah like cold water. She took an involuntary step backward, her mind racing. "Your wife? But, I've been coming here for 3 years. I've never seen anyone." "I know." The man moved closer to the grave, staring down at his wife's name carved in stone. "I stopped coming regularly about 2 years ago. It was too painful. Every visit felt like losing her all over again. He paused, his jaw tightening. My name is Jonathan Chase. I'm the CEO of Chase Industries. You might have seen the name on buildings downtown. Sarah had seen the name. Chase Industries owned half the city, it seemed, office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. She had never imagined the man behind that empire would be standing here, in a cemetery at dawn, with tears in his eyes. I should go, Sarah said quickly, feeling like an intruder. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I shouldn't have been leaving flowers on your wife's grave without permission. No, Jonathan's voice was firm but gentle. Please, don't apologize. I want to thank you. Sarah stopped, turning back to face him. Jonathan knelt down by the grave, touching the wildflowers Sarah had just placed there. For the last year, maybe longer, every time I did manage to come here, there were fresh flowers. I couldn't figure out who was leaving them. I asked the cemetery caretaker, but he didn't know. It was a mystery, and honestly, it was a comfort. He looked up at Sarah, and his eyes were glassy with unshed tears. Knowing that someone remembered her, that someone cared enough to bring flowers, it meant everything to me. Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears. She seemed so alone. No one should be alone like that. No, Jonathan agreed softly. They shouldn't. He stood up, brushing off his expensive coat. Eliza believed that kindness was the most important currency in the world. She volunteered at homeless shelters, food banks, anywhere she could help. She always said that the smallest gestures could change someone's entire day. He smiled sadly. You've been proving her right all this time. They stood together in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by love for someone they'd lost, one to death, one to loneliness. Finally, Jonathan spoke again. I'm trying to start a foundation in Eliza's name, to help people who are struggling, people who need a hand up. I could use someone who understands what it's like to fight for every day, someone with compassion and heart. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. If you're interested, call me. There's a job waiting for you, if you want it. Sarah took the card with trembling hands, staring at the embossed lettering. She would have liked you, Jonathan said gently. Thank you for keeping her memory alive. As Sarah walked back through the cemetery that morning, the sun finally breaking through the clouds, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She looked back once and saw Jonathan kneeling by his wife's grave, his hand resting on the headstone, and she knew that neither of them would be quite so alone anymore. The flowers would keep coming, week after week, but now there would be two people leaving them, two people remembering, two people honoring a life that had touched them both, in different ways, across the distance of death and time.